The story of the third atomic bomb begins not in August, but in the pre-dawn hours of July 16th, 1945, in a remote desert in New Mexico. This was the day of the Trinity test. For the scientists of the Manhattan Project, it was the moment of truth. They had spent years and billions of dollars building a weapon of unimaginable power, but no one knew for sure if it would work. As the countdown reached zero, the darkness was torn apart by a light brighter than the sun. A massive fireball rose into the sky, forming the first atomic mushroom cloud. The heat was so intense, it turned the desert sand below into a sheet of green glass. The shockwave rolled outwards, shaking the ground and shattering windows over 100 miles away. The success of the Trinity test did more than just prove a bomb could work. It proved that the complex design of the plutonium bomb, nicknamed Fat Man, was successful. This was crucial. The little boy bomb dropped on Hiroshima used rare uranium, which was difficult and slow to produce. But the Fat Man plutonium design, tested at Trinity, could be built much faster. This meant that America was no longer limited to one or two atomic bombs. The door was now open to building many of them. The Trinity test transformed the atomic bomb from a single, terrifying experiment into a weapon that could be produced on an assembly line. Just 3 weeks after this successful test, the first atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. The world was stunned. But for the leaders in Washington and the scientists at Los Alamos, this was not the end. It was the beginning of a new, terrifying strategy. The success of the Trinity test meant that a third bomb was already more than just an idea. Its core was being prepared, and its potential targets were already being discussed. The era of atomic warfare had truly begun, and no one knew how many more bombs would follow. The world was about to learn the terrible meaning of the light that had flashed in the New Mexico desert. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 bomber Enola Gay appeared over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. At 8:15 a.m., it released a single bomb nicknamed Little Boy. The explosion was instant and catastrophic. A blinding flash was followed by a fireball hotter than the surface of the sun. The blast wave that followed flattened nearly everything within a 5-mile radius. Wooden buildings vaporized. Stone and steel structures were ripped apart. Tens of thousands of people died in an instant. Those who survived faced a new horror: radiation sickness. The destruction of Hiroshima was a shock to the entire world. But for Japan's military leaders, it was not enough to make them surrender. They believed the United States might have only one bomb, or at most, a very small number. They decided to wait and see. They did not have to wait long. Just 3 days later, on August 9th, another B-29 Boxcar took to the skies. Its primary target was the city of Kokura, but poor weather and smoke obscured the city. After 3 failed passes, the crew turned to their secondary target, the port city of Nagasaki. At 11:02 a.m., the Fat Man plutonium bomb, identical in design to the one tested in New Mexico, exploded over Nagasaki. The hilly terrain of the city contained the blast somewhat, but the damage was still immense. Another city was left in ruins, with tens of thousands more killed or injured. These 2 attacks were not separate, isolated events. They were part of a deliberate plan. The quick 1-2 punch was designed to prove a critical point to the Japanese leadership. America did not have just one atomic bomb. We had at least 2, and we were willing to use them. The message was clear: surrender now or face more of the same. But the question hanging in the air, a question that would shape the next critical days, was a simple one. How many more did America have? While the dust was still settling over Nagasaki, a quiet and terrifying process was already in motion. The success of the 2 atomic attacks did not mean the work was finished. In fact, for the scientists and engineers at the secret city of Los Alamos, New Mexico, it was just the next phase. Deep inside the secure laboratories, a third plutonium core was being prepared. This shiny metallic sphere was the heart of another Fat Man-type bomb, identical to the one that had just destroyed Nagasaki. This was not a backup plan. It was the next weapon in line. The machinery of the Manhattan Project was now an efficient assembly line. The immense effort and money spent had created a system that could produce these terrible weapons, not as rare, one-of-a-kind devices, but as a series. After years of struggle, the process was finally working. Official documents from the time laid out a chilling schedule. The third bomb's components were slated to be ready for delivery by August 19th. That was just 10 days after the bombing of Nagasaki. But it didn't stop there. Plans showed that a fourth bomb could be ready by the end of August. And if the war continued into September, the production would speed up even more. The scientists estimated they could finish a new atomic bomb every 10 days, and soon, one every 3 to 4 days. This changes the story completely. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not the end. They were the beginning of a potential campaign of destruction. The United States was preparing to rain down a continuous stream of atomic bombs on Japan. The third bomb was not just an idea. It was a physical object, a real weapon being assembled by real people. Its existence meant that the clock was ticking down to a potential third atomic attack, and then a fourth, and a fifth. The world was on the brink of a new kind of war, one where entire cities could be erased on a regular schedule. With a third bomb being built, a difficult and grim question had to be answered. Where would it be dropped? The Target Committee, a group of military and scientific advisors, had to choose the next city. This was not a simple military decision. It was a political and psychological one. The primary goal was to force Japan's surrender as quickly as possible. Every day the war continued meant more American and Japanese casualties. The committee needed a target that would deliver the biggest shock to the Japanese leadership, breaking their will to fight on. Several cities were on a list of potential targets. Some advisors suggested targeting a large military base or industrial center. Others argued for a city that had been largely untouched by conventional bombing, so the destructive power of the atomic bomb would be undiluted and unmistakable. But one name stood out above all others: Tokyo. Tokyo was the heart of the Japanese Empire. It was the home of Emperor Hirohito and the central government. Destroying Tokyo with an atomic bomb would be the ultimate psychological blow. It would show that no place in Japan was safe, not even the seat of their divine emperor. However, Tokyo presented a problem. The city had already been devastated by massive firebombing raids earlier in 1945. Huge areas were already reduced to ashes. Some advisors worried that dropping an atomic bomb on an already ruined city would not demonstrate its unique, terrifying power effectively. They feared the Japanese military might dismiss it as just another larger firebombing attack. The debate was tense. Should they use the third bomb on a fresh, untouched city to maximize the shock? Or should they strike directly at the head of the empire in Tokyo, risking that the impact would be less visible? While this debate raged in secret, the third plutonium core was being finished at Los Alamos, moving closer to its destiny with every passing hour. As American officials debated the third bomb's target, a tense and dramatic race against time was unfolding. In the United States, the machinery of war was moving forward with relentless efficiency. The third plutonium core was nearly ready at Los Alamos. The plans were being drawn up. The military was preparing to deliver the weapon, with a potential strike date as early as August 19th. But across the Pacific, a different kind of drama was taking place. Inside the Japanese government, a fierce battle was raging. The news of the two atomic bombings, followed by the Soviet Union's declaration of war, had thrown the leadership into chaos. The Japanese Supreme Council was split. One group, the Peace Party, understood the reality. They saw that with atomic bombs falling and the Soviets now attacking, Japan's situation was hopeless. They argued for surrender based on the terms offered by the Allies. The other group, the War Party, refused to give up. They were prepared to fight to the last man, woman, and child. They believed that if Japan could inflict massive casualties on any American invasion force, they could still negotiate a better peace deal. They were willing to sacrifice millions of their own people for this desperate goal. For days, the two sides argued in meetings that stretched late into the night. The outcome was uncertain. The war party was powerful and held significant influence over the military. This created a terrifying situation. While the Japanese leaders debated, the American atomic assembly line continued its work. The clock was ticking down towards August 19th. If the deadlock in Tokyo was not broken, the third bomb would be completed, shipped across the Pacific, and loaded onto a waiting aircraft. The world was held in a fragile balance, and the decision of a few men in a room in Tokyo would determine whether a third Japanese city would be erased from the map. The deadlock in the Japanese government was complete. For days, the Supreme Council had argued about surrender, with both sides refusing to back down. The military leaders insisted on fighting to the bitter end, despite the atomic bombs and the Soviet attack. The situation seemed hopeless. The American deadline of August 19th was drawing closer. In a desperate move, the Prime Minister asked Emperor Hirohito to intervene. This was an unprecedented step. The emperor was seen as a godlike figure, and by tradition, he remained above political decisions. He listened, but he did not command. On the morning of August 14th, the emperor entered the bunker where the Supreme Council was meeting for one final dramatic session. The air was thick with tension. After listening to both sides repeat their arguments, the emperor did something no Japanese emperor had ever done before. He spoke up to make a political decision. His voice was quiet, but his words were historic. He said that continuing the war would only result in the complete destruction of Japan and the loss of countless more lives. He pointed to the terrifying power of the atomic bombs, stating that the enemy now possessed a weapon capable of wiping out the entire Japanese race. The time has come, he said, to bear the unbearable. He was referring to the shame of surrender. He declared that Japan must accept the Allies' terms and end the war. The emperor's word was final. The military leaders who had been so defiant bowed their heads in obedience. The debate was over. Japan would surrender. That same day, a message was sent to the United States government, announcing Japan's acceptance of the surrender terms. In that single moment, the course of history changed. The planned delivery of the third atomic bomb, scheduled for just a few days later, was suddenly no longer necessary. The emperor's voice had stopped the atomic clock. With Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement, the world stepped back from a terrifying future. The third atomic bomb, its core ready and its potential target under debate, was never assembled for combat. The assembly line of destruction was finally halted. But the story of the third bomb forces us to ask a profound question. What if? What would have happened if the Japanese government had remained deadlocked for just one more week? The third bomb would almost certainly have been used. Its target would likely have been a major city like Tokyo, delivering what the U.S. hoped would be a final decisive blow. The destruction would have been catastrophic, adding tens of thousands more casualties to the terrible toll of the war, and it would not have ended there. The Manhattan Project's production schedule was real. A fourth bomb was expected by the end of August. A fifth and sixth would have followed in September. The United States was prepared to launch a sustained nuclear bombing campaign, dropping atomic weapons on Japanese cities every week to 10 days until the empire crumbled. This reign of ruin, as it was described, would have fundamentally altered the end of World War II and the world that emerged from it. The moral legacy of the atomic bombings would be even more heavily debated. The number of Japanese lives lost would have been vastly higher. The physical and radioactive scars on Japan would have been far more widespread. Instead, the war ended after 2 atomic strikes. The third bomb became a historical footnote, a weapon that was ready but never used. Its existence serves as a powerful reminder of how close we came to a different, even more devastating end to the war. It shows that history is not always inevitable, but can turn on a single decision, a single voice, in a single room. The story of the third bomb is ultimately a story about the path not taken and a warning of the destruction that was narrowly avoided.